Peace and justice for the Spokane Three, when ego gets in the way of fairness. We linked arms with voices joined in harmony and played the game, pretending to care about our neighbors. There was solidarity and connection for a moment, but it was fleeting. For some, it felt beautiful, a chance to share our time and energy with other peace and justice activists. For others, it was incredibly painful, more proof that we didn't belong. The familiar faces, the familiar songs, the hope for peace, the fight for justice, we'd all been here before, some as leaders, some as followers, some with true love in our hearts, and some merely playing a role. We were there to raise money for the Spokane Three, a worthy cause on the surface, but as some questioned in Facebook comments this morning, where did the money really end up? Was it distributed equitably? The defendants aren't equally needy, so did those with greater need get a bigger piece of the pie? How did the sponsoring groups benefit? Following the money is always a valid endeavor. When some benefit at the expense of others, that's not justice, it's manipulation. When we give our time, money, and energy to a noble cause, we should be able to expect that our resources are used wisely and fairly. Sadly, that did not happen last night. One voice dominated, taking up too much space in the crowded hall. It was uncomfortable, but nobody dared to say a word. When ego gets in the way of integrity, the timid are shamed into silence, and we all pretend not to care that one person is sucking all the air out of the room. Later, in private, with those we can trust, we speak our truths, but not amongst the larger group, where our words can be used against us like daggers to our hearts and bullets to our reputations. The twisting of a victim's words is one of the most predictable, manipulative techniques used by bullies with weak egos. Weak ego or big ego. Paradoxically, the two expressions carry the same meaning. A coward with power who displays grandiosity and disregard for the rights of others. Big egos and weak egos are dangerous egos. Getting on the wrong side of a big ego is risky. Getting on the wrong side of multiple big egos is deadly. Quote, "Our mission is to engage everyday people to build a just and nonviolent world through community organizing and leadership development. Our vision for PJAL's everyday people are together advancing peace, racial equity, economic justice, and human rights through campaigns grounded in the intersection of these values. Our Peace and Justice Action League community is intergenerational, cross-class, multiracial, urban and rural, and disproportionately LGBTQ." End quote. The Peace and Justice Action League of Spokane, PJALS, was one of the organizers at last night's event. This is their mission statement: predictable, seemingly unimpeachable. As with all mission statements, without commitment and conviction, it is merely a collection of words. Words that are not backed up by actions are propaganda. False advertising is ubiquitous in the nonprofit sector and can be extremely hard to see until you or a loved one becomes a victim of the propaganda. Victims can't unsee the harm caused by false advertising. We live with the effects of betrayal every day. Peace and justice only for some is peace and justice for none. The misconnect between PJAL's stated mission and their real-world behavior of their leadership team should be a concern for every advocate for peace and justice in our community, but unfortunately, it is not. Disproportionately LGBTQ. That seems like an odd qualifier in a group dedicated to peace and justice for all. I have no problem with organizations that center LGBTQ rights. Every marginalized community needs organizations focused on their specific needs. But for an organization claiming to protect the rights of all human beings, being disproportionately anything goes against the stated intention of their mission. This qualifier begs the question, who are the members of PJALS? Are they truly intergenerational, cross-class, multiracial, urban and rural? Judging by last night's turnout of donors, none of this statement is true. The attendees were overwhelmingly older, privileged, urban, white, and not obviously members of the LGBTQ community. In contrast, food and drink services were provided by the Latinx community, and the three intended beneficiaries of the fundraiser fall into very different demographics than the donors. On the surface, there's nothing wrong with this dynamic, but if you take off the masks and remove the veils, there's an ugly reality that older privileged white activists would rather not admit to. It's 2026, and civil rights protests are more divided today than they were in the 60s and 70s. Liberal privileged white people like to blame all of our problems on Trump, but that's disingenuous. Our greatest civil rights abuses have been around for decades and have nothing to do with Trump. In many ways, racism, sexism, classism, and ableism are worse today than they were in the 60s, precisely because we haven't genuinely made progress. I can already hear the protests from the older privileged white people to that last comment, but that's the problem. When I earn the trust of someone in a different demographic, their honesty is refreshing. Many in marginalized communities are frustrated with the virtue signaling displayed by PJALs and similar groups in this town. They are reluctant to admit this to me until I ensure confidentiality. Their words are always off the record, and I respect that. Some are running for office and know they cannot afford to offend the demographic that is most likely to deliver a victory in our hopelessly divided community. White moderates and neoliberals who claim to be progressives hold a great deal of power over the rest of us. Ballots have dropped and are due by August 4th. A few candidates have jumped on the Spokane 3 bandwagon to benefit their campaigns. For some, the commitment is genuine. For others, it is performative. Performative altruism is manipulative. Virtue signaling is ugly. Picking and choosing who deserves peace and justice based on who we know and who we like is the ugliest discrimination of all. For the vast majority of victims of oppression in Spokane and beyond, the elections won't make any difference in their lives. Rates of anxiety, depression, addiction, loneliness, alienation, poverty, domestic abuse, sexual assault, and suicide don't change based on who is in charge. I invite you to spend a few days at the county courthouse or at Frontier Behavioral Health and imagine being a defendant or a patient with no support. Nobody to bail you out, nobody to call when in distress, nobody to defend you against false allegations, nobody to hold you when you're broken on the ground, nobody to talk you out of killing yourself when the pain becomes too great. Suicide, a topic everyone wants to ignore except for those of us who are desperately suicidal. When we find the courage to admit to our intense fear, we aren't just asking for attention. We are genuinely begging for support. Seeing suicidality as manipulative increases stigma, which increases deaths. If your loved one were suicidal, wouldn't you want them to call you before calling a stranger on a crisis line? I reached out to PJALs in March of this year when I was desperate for community and support. I'd been torn to shreds by my family and my former community in Spokane. I'd been betrayed by therapists and attorneys and then told that my despair was my own fault. I was deep in a suicidal depression that had been going for months with no end in sight. I signed up for the PJALs Peacekeeper training as a way to meet like-minded advocates for peace and justice. I completed the training and attended the PJALs conference. I had hope for healing for the first time in months, and then the 3 PJALs leaders told me that I was not wanted. They indicated that I was welcome to donate to the group and to show up in support, but I was not good enough to wear a peacekeeping vest or be part of the inner circle. How is that peaceful or just? I begged for understanding. I proposed mediation. I asked members to advocate for me. I was rejected again and again and again. The leaders wouldn't even engage in conversation. They thought I'd go away. Perhaps they hoped that I would kill myself, and they almost got their wish. I remain in an intractable suicidal depression that I am told is my own fault. I am suicidal because I was rejected, and I am rejected because I am suicidal. Of course, it makes no sense to anyone with empathy or even common sense, but empathy and common sense are clearly in short supply in this toxic community. I've been reluctant to admit the egregious abuse of PJAL's leadership because I am painfully aware of how powerful bullies can destroy lives. But last night was the last straw. Seeing my abusers held up as model activists for peace and justice cut me to the core. I made eye contact. They looked away. Cruel, cowardly. Nobody else could see it, but fear filled the room. To calm my nerves, I introduced myself to one of the Spokane 3 and had a robust conversation about mental health and justice in our community. They saw me. They validated me. They thanked me for my support and insight. It is for them and for me that I am speaking up. I believe they were the only one of the three that stayed the entire time and supported the other two. I truly hope that the funds that were raised last night are distributed equitably, but I mostly hope that PJALS doesn't benefit financially in any way from the event. It's bad enough that they've tokenized these three brave souls. They shouldn't benefit from abusing them like my therapist benefited from abusing me. I'm not writing this to be vindictive. I don't want any more people in our community to suffer as I am suffering. I'm inviting PJAL's leadership and their defenders to do some soul searching and reconsider the words of their mission statement. Quote, "Everyday people are together advancing peace, racial equity, economic justice, and human rights through campaigns grounded in the intersection of these values." End quote. If my story can be the catalyst for change, it is worth the pain it took to write this. I would love nothing more than to repair with anyone who has judged and rejected me. We can set an example for other advocates and show that conflict resolution need not be scary. We can all behave with integrity, humility, and grace as we face difficult subjects and work towards healing for all. Or we can remain on our high horses as we look down on others with judgment and scorn. We can double down on denial, avoidance, and blame, and live forever controlled by toxic shame. I'm choosing love, compassion, peace, and justice. I hope others will join me.